Ačiū visiems susirinkusiems į mūsų paskaitą ir aš perėsiu į anglų kalbą, kadangi visa paskaita bus anglų kalba. Ar pasiruošęs? So hello everybody, and welcome to our talk, to our lecture. And my name is Eugenia, and I'm from here, from Lithuania. And with me is Kamal, and he's from France, but originally from Comoro Islands, small islands close to Madagascar in Indian Ocean. And together we make the MAD project. The MAD project, of course, MAD means crazy, and you will get to know why it's crazy, but also MAD stands for make a difference. And also, while we are talking, if you don't understand something, please stop us and we will try to explain and translate if needed. So just feel free and relax to interact with us. So the MAD project. We have created the MAD project a year ago, exactly a year ago. That's when we decided that we want to do something positive about a very specific issue. There is a growing Islamophobia in Europe, where people express their hate to the other culture, and specifically to the Muslim culture, to Muslim people, not culture. So we decided that we want to do something positive as a contrast to the mass media that usually portrays Muslim people very negative. It's always, about terrorists and suicide bombers and oppression of women and this and that. So we decided, let's do something, and we created a project, and we called it a MAD project, or Making a Difference project. And our first initiative, we called it the Missing Picture, because we decided that we want to travel in the Muslim majority countries and learn something positive from people that we meet there, mostly from artists. So we traveled, and today we're going to share some of our experiences with you. And I think Kamal will talk a bit about the travel. So here's the map on the wall. We have been traveling for 8 months. We have been in Indonesia, over here. We have traveled from Bali Island through Java Island and then Sumatra Island. We have spent 4 months in Indonesia. And Indonesia is a Muslim majority country. That's why we went there in first place. Then we went to Malaysia, which is over here. And from Malaysia, we were flying to Egypt, and from Egypt we went to Palestine, to Palestinian territories. So in total we have spent 8 months traveling, meeting people, interviewing people, documenting our experiences, documenting interesting stories. And as a result, we created lectures, and Kamal will talk a bit about them.
Yes, hello everyone. Okay, I try anyway. So what we do now is the second part of the project. 8 months in Asia and Middle East, and 3 months in Europe. The first part, it was funded by us, all of it. And the second part now, it's a lot of help from friends and new friends and friends that we don't know. It means they have put some money on this trip, and that's what we're doing now. We give lectures about all this that you read, unity in diversity. It's about Southeast Asia, Malaysia and Indonesia, promoting the unity despite all these differences of cultures, of religions, of everything that they have there. So they have this political policy to say, to promote unity in diversity. So that's one of our first lectures, which is quite big, this one. And the second one, it's called Art of Revolution. It's about the art of the revolution in Egypt since 2011. The third one, Palestine, it's about cultural resistance. Again, we try to present a missing picture of this region, Palestine, because we often hear about terrorism and so on and so on. So here we documented many forms of art expressions in Palestine, and we show it. Visual arts, it's all about visual art in Southeast Asia and the Middle East. Performing arts, it's all about performing arts in the 4 places that we have been. And Artyvism, it's what we're going to talk about today, art, cultures, and activism in Southeast Asia and Middle East. And we have a specific one where we mention Islam. It's called Islamic art, the art expressions in Muslim-majority countries, Southeast Asia and Middle East. Architecture of spiritual places, it's about all the spiritual places that we have documented, from Christian churches, Catholics, Muslims, Hindus, Buddhists, and so on, with a bit of spirituality in there. Women in Muslim societies, it's a very interesting topic, especially related to the Islamophobia atmosphere in Europe. We give a missing picture of women who are fighting every day, who are making their society more progressive. And these kind of women in the Middle East and in Egypt, there are so many. And architecture of the occupation, it's about Palestine again, how the occupation transforms the space in Palestine. And art of nomadism, it's about us having fun, how we made the project, and what went wrong, what went good. So if you want to organize something later, you can just call us or write to us, and it's gonna be we will be there. So today, Artyvism, it's gonna last 1.5 hours. Eugenija will talk about 45 minutes, focused on Indonesia and Malaysia, and I will take over to talk about Palestine and Egypt. Yeah.
So we chose to talk about Artyvism because there is a lot of movements to push for some kind of social change all around Europe or US, also in Southeast Asia and the Middle East, especially with the revolutions in the Arab world, Arab Spring. There is a lot of activism and activists. And we just wanted to find out how art or cultures are used in this activism, how art can help to push through a certain message. So this is our focus today, and I hope it can be an inspiration, and you can also, and that you will also find out something new and interesting from the 4 countries that we're going to talk about. So, as Kamal said, I will focus on Indonesia and Malaysia, and I will focus on environmental issues. We often talk about climate change and global warming and a lot of, let's say, garbage issues, a lot of environmental disasters or oil spill and so on and so forth. So, and Indonesia and Malaysia can be good examples to see how people there fight against the environmental issues. And to start with, I want to show you this quote. Modernity does not always mean to go forward, and tradition does not always mean to go backward. And that will summarize my presentation about Indonesia and Malaysia and about how they deal with the environmental issues. For example, here in Europe, we call ourselves modern, developed countries. We have a lot of TVs and all the technologies. We use cars and so on. And sometimes our media or ourselves as well, we tend to look at the traditional communities or at the indigenous population in African countries or Asian countries a little bit from up to down. Like, oh, they are backwards, they are undeveloped, they're not as good as us because they are, they are in the back there. They are not really good. So, but actually, that's also my point today. That I want you to look at these traditional communities in a different light. To look at them and try to see what we can learn from them, how they live together with the nature, how they live in peace with the nature. So that's why I use this quote: modernity does not always mean to go forward, and tradition does not always mean to go backward. And I will start with a little video, and I will be in the video and I will talk in the video, and you will see me as well, and I will drink my water while I'm talking there. this video, we have gone to a very traditional community in Indonesia. Very traditional, meaning that they actually isolate themselves from the modern society. And I will describe this community and talk more about how they live, and then I will talk about other examples and talk about the environmental issues and how we can use the example of this traditional community to fight certain environmental problems.
It's a traditional tribe that lives in peace with the nature. They preserve the forest. They try to avoid all the modern things, like mobile phones, oversized forest TV. Actually, 2,000 Badui. Inner Baduis and the other one is outer. And inside the inner Baduis, you cannot even use toothpaste or soap. These are considered chemicals. And thus it's against the nature. And actually many of them are Muslims, but it's people call it Islam, which is a mixture of Islam and old Sudanese religion called Sunna. And actually the village that we just passed before is probably 80% Muslim, and the tribe here a little bit Muslim, and still they all do this together. So we're going to get back to the one
We walked because to get to this traditional community that I said is isolating itself from the outside, let's call it outside world, we had to drive for quite a long time, and then we had to hike for about 3 hours to get there. So the only transport that you could use is actually motorcycle to get there. Otherwise, you have to hike for 3 hours. And just wanted to show you the surrounding. They live in a bit in the mountains, and I was saying in the video that this tribe, they don't use modern things, and they don't use it not because they don't have them or they don't have access to them. They have the access, but it's a conscious choice not to use certain chemicals like toothpaste or shampoo or fertilizers for their earth, not to damage the nature around. So actually, instead of toothpaste or instead of shampoo, they use natural products, natural ingredients that they can find in the forest. And also the way they do agriculture, probably in our books, in history books, can be described as a primitive one. But actually there's a whole philosophy that they use for agriculture, and why they don't use fertilizers, why they don't use certain metal materials for working the earth. It's just because they want to preserve the earth and they want to save it from degradation. I was also explaining in the video that the Badui tribe is made in such a way that there is outer Badui group and inside Badui group. An outer Badui group surrounds the inner Badui in a circle and serves as a buffer zone to keep the intruders like us, the people from outside, from going inside. It's not that they don't want to see other people, but they're really trying to preserve this traditional way of living. I was also explaining that most of the people in the tribe are Muslim, and but it's a little bit of mix of Islam and a local traditional religion which is called Sunda Wiwitan. So and Sunda Wiwitan religion is about honoring the earth, honoring the nature. So they actually have a lot of local and traditional knowledge, historical knowledge of how to live in peace with the nature and how to preserve the nature. So Badui tribe itself is an indigenous culture in West Java. So it has been there for a very long time, and the knowledge was passed through centuries, from one family to the other. And then another important thing about the Badui culture or Badui tribe is that they are completely self-sustainable. So it means that they grow their own food, they produce their own utensils, they don't have electricity, but they have a system for managing the water, for example, the irrigation system. They use the river. That's why also they don't use any toothpaste or chemicals, because to wash themselves they use the river, and in this way they preserve the water in the river from any chemical adds in the water, so they can actually drink it, and it's safe to drink this water. The tribe itself is quite small. It's 5,000 or 8,000 people, and again, for quite a long time they were presented in the media in Indonesia as a primitive tribe, as a stupid or backwards, and there was all this negative media about that. But actually now, and that's why we're also talking about this culture, now a lot of people try to go to that tribe and to learn this traditional knowledge, because it's not only about how to work the earth or how to live in peace with nature. There's a lot about medicine, traditional medicine. They have a very, very deep knowledge about medical plants and how to use different medical plants for healing processes. It's not voodoo, it's like in Lithuania we also grow different herbs for teas, and our grandmothers, they would know how to use these herbs for different diseases. And they do have also a set of rules to how the community should act between each other. And one of them is, they say that we must follow the rules so we prevent disaster from happening. And actually, they refer to the climate change and global warming and all the negative effects that it brings. Okay, the top picture on your left, there are houses, and they are all made of natural materials. Everything is made out of the materials that the Badui tribe they find in the forest. As well, they produce their own fabric. And the picture that you can see on the bottom on the left is the fabric that they produce locally in this tribe. There's also a lot of people come to buy the fabric because it's naturally made, and that's quite rare in the cities to buy a naturally made fabric. They also produce a lot of jewelry, they produce a lot of utensils that are all naturally made. And then on the bottom on the right you can see Kamal on the bridge that is made out of bamboo, and there are actually quite a number of architects that come to learn this local knowledge of how to make these bridges, because they are completely natural, eco-friendly, let's call it like this. And this was a very traditional tribe with a lot of knowledge from the past. And now I will talk about another community that have used this local traditional culture in their community. They transferred this knowledge and they created a self-sustainable community. If we try to look in Europe, all around Europe, there are many communities, for example in France, that are being created that try to be self-sustainable, that try to be independent from big corporations or supermarkets, that try to provide each other with a natural, ecological food. I know that there is one such community in Lithuania. I don't remember now the name, but I know there is one. So this movement of creating self-sustainable communities, it's growing also in Europe, and that's why I think it's also good to talk about it. So Kasepohan Chiptagelar is another community, a modern community that uses the traditional culture of West Java, the Badui tribe, the traditional knowledge of Badui tribe, to implement it in that community and be self-sustainable and independent. So that's a picture of the rice fields, and this community implements several principles. First principle is self-sufficiency. So again, as the Badui tribe, this community, Kasepohan Chiptagelar, is almost 100% self-sustainable. They produce their own food. That is the most important thing, and the food is ecological, of course. And if we talk about the rice, and rice is the main the main crop used in that community. If we look at the rice that is grown now in China, for example, or the rice that we buy in our shops here in Lithuania, it's rice that is produced from the seeds that were chemically or genetically affected. It's rice that, for example, is made so that this rice can grow, let's say, 3 times per year, that you can have 3 harvests. So it is genetically affected already, which is not good for our body. Everything that is done in not in a natural way is not good for our bodies. So in this community, they actually have a very old type of rice that is not genetically modified, that is not affected, and it's called dry rice. And they can grow it only once per year. It's not grown in the wet fields, but it's grown in this dry way. And this rice is extremely healthy. Is very ecologically friendly. Let's call it like this. And actually, it's very rare to find this rice. So this community, they actually don't sell the rice because it's very important to have enough for themselves of food. That's why they also are independent from any outside products. They grow everything inside. Of course, they buy such things as sugar from outside, but mostly they grow their food themselves. Then they also continuing about self-sufficiency. One more thing. For example, this community is a modern community, so they have motorcycles, they have radios, and they have other things. But for example, the way they have done their electricity, they have put turbines on the mountain rivers, and they're independent from the government electricity. So they produce their own electricity, and they supply the whole village and actually the villages around. Then the second principle of this community is cultural dignity. So this community, it is modern, but it also has it has been there for more than 300 years, or maybe even longer. So they have their own traditions that are old, and they put a lot of effort into preserving these traditions, not to be affected by the Western influences, but not only Western, but the influences from the city. So they try to educate their children to stay in the community, to learn the traditions, to continue, and to live this community lifestyle, not to live in the cities and to start the individual life, but to live in the community and share things. And they also, the third principle is political sovereignty. So again, it means that they have their own organization. They actually have their own little army. It's not a real army, but it's a group of men that protect the forest around. Because this community is created in the natural reserve, and the men of the community, they go around the forest, which is one of the, I think it's one of the 2 or 3 forests in Java Island that is still untouched by human activities. They try to preserve the trees, the forest, the natural environment there. So again, and the way they try to preserve that, they learn from this Badui tribe that I've been talking about. They learn about this culture, Badui culture, and they implement the traditional knowledge from there in this community. They also have a developed system of natural resources management. Like they preserve the forest. There is a, let's say, a quota on how many trees can be cut, how to use the trees, how to use certain things. One of the principles that they try to maintain within the community, and they try to educate and sensibilize the community, is to use only as much as you need, not to use more than you need. For example, I have been reading a study that more than 40% of food in UK is thrown away, so it's not used. So we consume, we buy a lot of food, but we throw away 40% of it. That's an example from UK. So in this community, they try to prevent this from happening, that they only use as much as they need and not more. Of course, this community is a good example because there is no poverty, there are no crimes in this community, They live sustainably with the nature, so they preserve their natural environment. They recycle, they try to use as less chemicals as possible. For the rice fields, they don't use fertilizers, they use the natural knowledge of how to grow rice and natural plants instead of chemical fertilizers. So they have used, again, I repeat myself, this traditional culture. They implemented the traditional culture in their community, and this is their way to fight against global warming and climate change. And this is their contribution of how to improve our Earth and how to prevent the crisis from happening. Again, there are many people, many Westerners, and more representatives of other communities in Indonesia coming here to learn more about how to preserve the nature, how to be in peace with the nature. To have a little, I'll show you a little video just to see how it looks around in the community. It was a part of celebration, a rice harvest celebration. So like I said, the rice is grown only once a year, so you can imagine how important it is to celebrate the harvesting of the rice. It's a big celebration that gathers a lot of people from local communities. It was visited several times by Indonesian president himself, and there are quite some Westerners coming to learn about the culture. Here there are some photos from celebration. On the first photo there are some men, local men, dressed in the clothes that are made locally. The black clothes are made locally from natural materials. Then in the middle there are women having a traditional dance. I was talking about cultural dignity. This is a traditional dance in the community that they try to preserve. And the third picture is the rice harvest itself. The plant that you see hanging is the rice crops that are brought by the men from the fields. And also the last part that you have just seen here, it's showing the instruments, the local instruments made of bamboo, and there are drums also made of local materials. And they dance and they play music. And you can also pay attention to the houses. They are all made of natural materials, all made out of wood, bamboo, and local plants. I was telling you about this traditional Badui community, just to give you and about this Cipta Gelar community, to give you an example of how a traditional culture can be implemented and used in a certain way to fight environmental issues. I will continue to talk about environmental issues, but I think there was a question.
Do they have an autonomy?
Autonomy? Yes, they do have autonomy. I was talking about political sovereignty. Actually, they have a king. They call him a king. He's actually a chief. And there's also a council of the elders, and they have their own little army. It's not really an army, but like a man trained to deal with the problems. Let's say I don't think they have any guns, but they preserve the forest. Their main task is to be in the forest and make sure that there's no illegal logging, so there's no illegal cutting of the trees or illegal hunting of the animals, because the forest around this community is untouched. It was until now it is untouched by by activities from people. It is also a declared national park, but they have problems now. I've been reading that there are people who want to come there and cut the trees, because you can imagine the trees are very old and it's a very good wood for producing furniture and to sell, to produce different things. And this community, there are more communities, it's one of the examples. There is like a network of communities that actually take care of the forest. But of course there are bigger forces with money that want to do something to benefit from the forest. Even that the community tries to keep the people together and to educate them on how to love their culture, to understand why this culture is good. Of course, they are attracted by by the city, by the technology, by the modernity that is offered there. But there are also people coming to live in there. Like there are people. We met a man who used to live in the city. He was rich and he was having a lot of things, and then he understood that it's not the way of life, and he decided to come to this village to kind of isolate himself, because again, to get to this village you really need to spend the whole day driving and walking, and so, because it is in the mountains. So I guess there is a movement back and forth. So that was an example of a traditional culture implemented to be with to fight with environmental issues. Maybe we take it a bit after the questions. So now I want to talk about another group, which is called Taring Padi. Again, this is in Indonesia. Taring Padi means this is a community of artists, community uniting 10, 20, maybe more artists. Taring Padi means rice fangs, rice teeth. It symbolizes people power. Why it symbolizes people power? Because this community of artists, they say, when we protest against our government or against corporations, we might be very small, like a little flea or a fly or a little insect in the rice fields, but when we bite, it really, really hurts. So actually this, their name, Taring Padi, can say a lot about the activities that they do. It's an independent, non-profit cultural community that fights for people's power. This community was created in 1998, after the fall of dictatorship in Indonesia, and it was in the time of elections. So whenever there is a fall of dictatorship and there is an election coming, there are a lot of political forces fighting against each other, trying to divide people. There is this process going on in Egypt, for example, at the moment. So this group, Taring Padi, at that time in 1998, they tried to unite people, to be united, not to be divided by different political forces. And they used art. They used art for it. As I mentioned, it's a community of artists. What they're famous for producing woodcut posters. So they take a big piece of wood and they carve it together into a poster. For example, this top picture you can see here, it's a big poster. It's the size of me. It's like a human size poster. It's made out of wood. One of the main principles of Taring Padi that each piece of art, each woodcut poster is created together, is created as a community work. So it doesn't belong to anybody, but it belongs to the people. And then what they do with this woodcut poster, they cover it with the ink or with the black color, and they put on top textile or paper, and in this way they produce many posters. It's like an old-fashioned, let's say, an old-fashioned way of producing poster. But actually they do have an access to printing machines. It's just that the process of creation, the poster itself, the process of working on something in community is very important. They implement a lot of this community thing in their group. Before they create any poster, they meet, they discuss the ideas, they make a kind of plan together in a group. You can imagine it's 20, 15 people, sometimes more. So they discuss the idea, and then all together they implement it, and all together they work. So here you can see one example of the poster. Here's another example, and there's actually a person standing here, so you can see how big this woodcut poster is. And what they're fighting for with their art, at the moment they are mostly opposing big corporations, or they fight for workers' rights, they fight for equality, they fight against corruption. They take all these issues that are well known both here in Lithuania or all around Europe. And what they do with these posters, they go into the communities and they distribute the posters. They also try to gather together communities and mobilize them or sensibilize them to go and protest against certain injustices. They not only produce posters, but they also create street art performances, theater. They create huge puppets for protests. They create songs. They create poetry. And for example, again, I was mentioning that the community, the sense of community is very important in this group of artists. So when they produce their work, any piece of art, the most important thing for them is that not that this piece of art belongs to somebody, that one of the artists can say, oh, this is my song or this is my poster. But when people start to say, this is our art, this is Indonesian or this is Javanese. So the best honor for an artist in this community, Taringpadi, is when people take their art and make it their own art. And to give you an example of how they fight and how, again, it is related to maybe environmental issues. On this picture, it's taken from internet, it's not our picture. There is a big corporation. First of all, Indonesia is very rich with natural resources. There are a lot of natural resources: oil, gas, diamonds, many things. It's very, very rich. And of course, when there are natural resources, there are companies that are interested to get these natural resources. So in East Java, where this photo was taken, there is a big corporation that is drilling for oil and gas. And when they were drilling, also Indonesia is a seismic is in seismic zone. It means that there are a lot of volcanoes, a lot of seismic activity. There are quite many earthquakes happening. So when they were drilling, they probably have touched something under the earth which they shouldn't have touched. And what happened? That there was a mud flow. It's like an eruption of hot earth. It was not an eruption of a volcano, but it was an eruption of hot earth mixed with lava and mixed with all kind of things from under the ground. And it happened because of the activity of this corporation. Of course, the corporation denies it until now, and there hasn't been a court case to deal with that. So what you see in the photo is a village completely destroyed by the hot mud, and you can also imagine that people have died. And you can see a mosque, a prayer house, completely covered with the mud. And this is like one of the tallest buildings maybe in the village. So there are many buildings covered by this mud, and many people suffer. So what this group, Taringpadi, what they did with their art, they created, again, these woodcut posters. And this is one of the examples you can see. Here there is they show the village that is covered with mud and the corporation. So this is the poster talking about the problem. They have created it. They have gone to the community that was destroyed by the mud flow. They have distributed these posters. They have talked to the people there to mobilize them to protest, because, as I said, there was no justice made for the people who suffered from this mud flow. So they mobilized the people. They also made art workshops with them to document the suffering that people experienced due to this disaster. They have also created theater performances, and they worked with different people there, using the art to help these people to, first of all, express their anger, and second, to protest what is happening and to demand justice. So the people were mobilized, they went to protest at the governmental institutions. So the group, they said their motto is art, activism, and rock and roll. So they also play rock, hard rock and roll, different styles of music, and yeah, they produce a lot of art, a lot of community art. That's one of the most important things for them, is to be in the community, in a strong community. Okay, my last example of environmental issues and art combined together is called University of Life. And I will go faster, so because I think I talked too much, so Kamal can continue talking about Palestine and Egypt. So University of Life sounds very big, and you think of a building with a lot of students, but actually University of Life is a garden. It's a garden that we have visited in Malaysia, and this is just one of the photos. There are a lot of photos. This garden was created by a man who has a very long name, Said Hussein Alatas. He has created this garden being inspired by the verses of Quran, the holy book of Muslims, that describes the paradise. The paradise that is also described in the Bible or in the Jewish Torah. So he was inspired by the description where it says that there are rivers and flowers and a lot of birds and so on. He has bought a big piece of land and he has planted it with a lot of different plants, flowers, trees from all around the world. Actually, he's now contesting to be in the books of record, Guinness Book, as a garden with the biggest collection of species, plant species from all over the world. It's the garden that everybody can come to. It's for free. There are houses. Like I said, it's a huge place. There are houses that you can stay overnight for free, and it's open for everybody. People can just come and stay there and enjoy the tranquility of it. They can enjoy the flowers. Also, the owner of the garden, he talks about the aromatherapy, sound therapy, touching therapy, and all kind of therapies. And it also his contribution to preserving the nature of Malaysia and to also calling people to go back to the nature, to treasure the nature, to take care of it. So he has created this garden and he made it open for everybody, so everybody can come and learn about how to be with the nature, to get inspiration. So he invites artists and he invites writers to be there. It's when you come there, it seems very chaotic because if you think about Japanese garden, it's very structured. There is a big structure in Japanese garden, let's say. In this garden, he just created. He created how he felt. The man who owns the garden. There are a lot of paths, there are a lot of rivers, there is a lot of water, a lot of flowers, a lot of smells and sounds. It's very peaceful. And also this man, he's a big activist. He's a political activist in Malaysia. So he talks a lot against corruption, against the government of Malaysia. And he says himself that my bad part is that I'm really biting, I'm really nasty to the politicians of Malaysia, but I also want to be good, and my good part is that I have created this garden as my contribution to the nature, as my contribution to preserving the nature and preserving the heritage of Malaysia. I will not talk more, but give a microphone to my colleague, Kamal, who will talk about role of art in conflict areas, that is Egypt and Palestine.
I will talk about role of art in conflict areas. First, I'm going to start with Egypt and Palestine. But you might wonder why we present the arts of Indonesia, Malaysia, both Muslim majority countries. But one of the ideas behind is to humanize. Humanize people living in Muslim majority countries, because now what's going on, while we are not so sensitive to Afghanistan being bombed or Iraq being what it is now, there is this process of the humanization of all those regions. So the approach that we have is to humanize and to give portraits of people living in Muslim majority countries, whether they are Muslims, Christians, Hindus, or atheists. And one of the misconceptions about Muslims in general, but this you can find it in most academical work actually. One of them is to say that Muslims like being dominated, or they don't like freedom, so they enjoy being oppressed. This you can find in maybe, I'm sure you don't have these kind of thoughts, but you can find in books such as the Enlightenment books in the 18th, 19th century until now, actually. So what we want here is to tell the portraits of those people so that you have a better idea that it's not always black and white. There is great things going on there. It's not only about oppression or terrorism or violence. There is people that do something for their own society. They enjoy freedom as we do, democracy as we want to. And Egypt, the Egyptian revolution, it's actually one of the surprises of this place. So first, let me say Tahrir is not a square, right? You heard about Tahrir Square. Okay, it's a square physically, but Tahrir, it means the place of liberation. It's a place of liberation for Egyptians, Muslims, Christians, atheists, non-religious people. So it's a place of liberation. But it's been 30 years now, more than 3 decades, and even more than that, that there is a serious dictatorship in Egypt and many other Muslim majority countries. But Egypt is one of the symbols that is going on now, the symbol of freedom and liberation since it started in 2011, January 2011. So this first slide, it's about the appropriation, reappropriation of the place. That's what happened since January 2011. The Egyptians reappropriate the place. It's a symbol of freedom. It's a symbol of a place that is owned by their people. And one of the symbols is to write on the walls, to make graffitis on the wall. And the other symbol, one of the symbols that I can say also is to pray, like you see in the other pictures, to play in public spaces. Here it's a Tahrir Square, it's the place of liberation. So every Friday, thousands of Muslims and Egyptians in general will come there and pray. Why? Because this place, it became, like I said, the symbol of liberation for all Egyptians. And what you don't see actually in this picture, the last picture, it's the Egyptians, Christians protecting the Egyptians, Muslims who are praying. Because there is, during the protest, there was a lot of violence from the police and so on. So here what you don't see is this circle of Egyptians, Christians who are protecting their fellow Egyptians, Muslims. So it was just to have an overview of how to, in terms of freedom, how people, especially here in Egypt, how they reappropriate the place to make their own place. Now I'm going to focus more about street art, revolution art. What you see is pictures painted in the street of Cairo. One of them, it's the place. The last picture that you see, it's the Tahrir's place, and the other one, it's about expressing freedom, because it became a symbol of expressing your freedom, expressing your anger, expressing your sadness and your frustrations. So these pictures, and there's a picture on the top or right, it's one of the pictures of the martyrs. Martyrs, it's someone who has died for a cause here for the Egyptian revolutions, so they are called martyrs. So the streets of Cairo became a symbol of freedom, of delivering a message to the other Egyptians, to say this what's going on now, this what happened, someone got killed, we have to keep on struggling, and all these expressions are in streets of Cairo, but not only in Cairo. You can find it in Alexandria, in the other cities, and so on. The picture that you see now, it's taken this year when I was there, in the big clashes, and I want to talk about Ammar and Awad. I met these two guys in the middle of protests in the street of Cairo. They are artists. So what they do, they paint on the walls. They paint on the walls different things. It can be graffitis, it can be painting women, and so on. But what was very shocking for me is to be in these clashes. It was quite violent, and to meet these two guys just painting on the wall like nothing is happening. So they keep very calm. They're very focused on what they're doing. So they have also a lot of harassment from the security, but also from some people in the street. But they don't care about it. They just keep painting. They did that for 3-4 days in a row, and they managed to have a beautiful result that Egyptians, when they walk through this street, can admire their work. And I'm going to focus first on Ammar and the Martyrs mural. So Ammar is a lecturer in one of the universities of Egypt. He came from another city to Cairo to paint the martyrs of the stadium massacre that I was talking about, but also other people killed during the revolution. More than 2,000 people got killed since 2011, and he came as a reminder of the tragedy that has been going on. So you see his paintings are mostly young men. He painted them in like the wings that you see, the orange wings that you see. He's very specialized in Coptic art, though I think he's Muslim, but for him, having these wings, it's an expression of the angel, that they go to heaven. So that's why he paints all of the portraits, putting them wings, saying that they would go to heaven because they are our angels, they are our martyrs. He kept painting that for 3-4 days, and we met him recently actually in Berlin where he could talk more about his work. Awad, it's another guy, because there were actually 4 to paint on this street called Mahmoud Street. Mahmoud Street is the most violent street during the revolution, so it became a symbol of resistance also. So the pictures that you see are mostly women. The first picture on the left, it describes the women during the revolution. The very first picture, the women climbing up the ladder. So it has a symbol. It means they climb up the ladder of freedom. It's a struggle for freedom. So the ladder symbolizes the revolution itself. And when they get on top of the ladder, it means they are free. And the second picture that you see, it's a kind on top. It's a tribute to women again, because he was telling me that women, they were the most powerful during the revolution. A few years ago, a decade ago approximately, there was a revolution. Women were about 10% of the protesters being in the street. But for this revolution, there was about 40 to 50% of women in the street. So Awad wanted to give a tribute to these women because while men were sleeping or were not daring to come in the street, some of the men, many women were in the street protesting with whether they are veiled or non-veiled, Muslims, Christians. All women were in the street to ask for the same rights, freedom and democracy. And the last picture that you see, it's a kind of how can I say? It's a kind of resume of what was going on. You can see a coffin carried by Egyptians, so it means the killing of Egyptians during the revolution. You can see black flowers. I don't know if you see that, but it's also to express the sorrow and the despair during the revolution. So it's his way to give tribute to women during the revolution, and it's also his way to say thank you to these women. And he was also telling me that painting on the wall, it's actually an old Egyptian tradition. So both of them, Awad and Ammar, they try to combine what's going on now and the art expression, tradition expression of Egyptian people. So I was saying that women were a lot during the revolution, and we met Zaha. Zaha, it's the person that you see with Eugenia on the left, bottom left. She's an amazing woman. I met her, I think, 3-4 times now. Every time I go to Egypt, I meet her. She's a human rights activist. She does a lot of things. But I met her for cultural understanding project. She has a project called Don't Hate Educate that she created after the cartoons of the prophets in 2005 in Denmark. She was telling me that actually if there was this tension when the cartoons appeared, it's because both of us, West and East, we didn't understand each other. So she created that great project that says we have to educate ourselves and we have to do something about it. But now that I've met her with Eugenia, she's very active in the revolution. She does a lot of things. Right now she's promoting one of her favorite president, and she advised many Egyptians, men and women, who to vote according to what they think, according to their opinions. She just give information about the candidates. So she was the one telling us if women were not there, there wouldn't be a revolution. And actually you can see this pattern in most of the revolution worldwide. Women take a great importance during times of conflict, during times of war, during times of militarizations. Women have a great impact on what's going on in the society. And coming from a patriarchal society, it's even more brave, but she was telling us it's not new for us. It's not new for us that Egyptian women are in the streets. It's actually something that we found very natural in our society. But she acknowledged that there is a patriarchal society, but fighting for the revolution, it's beyond that. It's we have as women and men, we have the same struggle, and we have to fight together. It was very inspiring talk that she gave us that day. And what you see in the other pictures is to show you how true it was. Because when I was there, women were leading the protests, like you see in the first pictures. Women were very angry, extremely angry. And a lot of them were crying because so some of their children got killed, or their husbands or relatives, but they were still in the street. The picture that you see on the top right, it was a day where the clashes were very intense. I was very terrified to be there and take pictures and make short movies, but that day was very intense. Still, you can find many women in front of the battle fighting as much as men were doing. So men with niqab, the full veil that you see, and young ladies that you see in the last picture being hurt, being injured. That day there was a lot of injuries and some people died. So they were part also of the revolution as much as men were. But also women, despite this positive thing, there was something wrong going on. During the 18 days of revolution last year, there was absolutely no harassment, nothing done against women, nothing done against minorities whatsoever. But this year, it was, actually this picture is from last year, the girl being beaten up by the military. It's from November of last year. So when the protests were still going on, there was more clashes. There was more clashes against women and against Egyptians in general. So the posters that you see here are kind of a reminder of what happened that day. Women, now this girl that you see in the blue bra became a symbol of oppression of the military council in Egypt, but also a symbol of the patriarchal society existing in Egypt. But people take it more against the military council in Egypt. It was very very touching to see how these two guys that you see, they are actually very famous painters. They were working in silence with other hundreds of Egyptians, like carrying together this poster to say this shouldn't be happen anymore. That this woman became a symbol of not only of oppression, but became a symbol of freedom also on her own. So many artists now try to use this sign, this blue bra girl, to denounce what's going on in Egyptian society. And the last picture that you see, it's actually a theater play that we have seen in Brussels. It was very interesting for us because it was about Palestine, right? It was a theater play about Palestine, but still this blue bra thing became a symbol in a Palestinian theater play, which is very interesting. So it became a symbol not only for Arabs or Palestinians, but worldwide. Like, I don't know if you know the scarf, the Palestinian scarf. Now it became, since decades, it's been a symbol of resistance. Now this blue bra became a symbol of resistance for Egyptians, but I guess it's going to be more and more popular in the years to come. And there was, now I want to talk very fast about the arts of the people. Because when freedom, when democracy appears, when people feel free, the creativity gets bigger, gets more creative, let's say. We could never see that. I was in Egypt like 3 years ago. You could never see these kind of things in the street of Cairo. But with the coming revolution, with people feeling that there's something great going on, the creativity gets stronger. So the first picture that you see, it's one of the positive things going on during the revolution and hopefully after the revolution. You see a Christian, probably he's a Muslim guy, but he's showing a Christian creativity, Christian sign and so on. And the lady in the middle, she's dressed like a fashion top model person with the Egyptian flag. And I don't know if you see it properly. There is the crescent and the cross. Yeah, you see that? And on the last pictures on the wall, you can see the same symbol. So that was one of the positive creativity that you could see during the revolutions. It means, despite what people say or what the mainstream media say about the Egyptian Christians and the Egyptian Muslims living there, there is a great community between us. It's not everything that you say. We are together as Egyptian, Palestinian Christians. We fight for the same struggle, and we acknowledge that maybe we have tensions, but what unites us is the same thing. So that's basically what we try to do with our talks, to say, despite religions and regardless of religions and races, we are all talking about the same thing. We are all human beings. So that's what they try to do. We could see many of these art expressions in Egypt. Because maybe you heard there was some clashes before the revolution. In the 1st January 2011, there was a church being targeted by the mainstream media were saying Muslims, fundamentalist Muslims were targeting the church, but actually they found out that it's actually the military itself that has targeted the church. So there's many of these things going on, and these forms of expressions come to say that despite all this, we are together. Zaha El-Nadi, the lady that I was talking about, she was telling us what was going on during the protest, saying that you could see Christians, priests coming and pray in Tahrir Square, and everybody, Muslims and Christians alike, will say Amen at the same time, expressing the feelings of togetherness. So there was also a lot of things like Muslims protecting the church of Christians, and like I said earlier, there was many Christians protecting the Muslims while they were praying. So these kind of things were not very much related, very much said. They were not very much said in the mainstream medias, also in Egypt. But here the people talk by themselves, both Christians and Muslims. So that was it about art expressions, graffitis, paintings on the wall, and protest. And after the revolution, there's something very special that came into the Egyptian society, the Tahrir monologues. Not that theater is not known by the Egyptians, but this is very special. It's about telling your story during the revolution. So these people who were the producers of this theater, they managed to gather more than 700 stories during the 18 days of the revolution. And this theater is played in public spaces for everybody to come and to hear the stories of people during the revolution. It can be old person coming and say that he was very happy that he was in the protest. It can be women coming and say that she was pushing her kids to go to the street and protest as much as the others. It can be veiled niqab women coming and tell her story as a protester. But this is also a symbol of freedom. People can express themselves in the street without having to be afraid of the policemen or military. Again, appropriation of the places in Egypt. So I will be very short on that, and I will pass now on Palestine. Palestine exists the same kind of theater long time ago. It started long time ago, and one of the theater is called Ashtar Theater, and the theater of the oppressed. It's a very interesting concept because I don't know if there's some pedagogues or teachers here. There's something in pedagogy called the pedagogy of the oppressed. It was created by Paulo Freire in the 70s. In the 70s, during the military ruling of Brazil and around South America. So that was the pedagogy of the oppressed. It was a way to, it's a new pedagogy to say that teachers and students must interact. He was calling the old system as a banking system, that the students are just sitting and listening to the teachers and just having information that at the end are not very relevant. So the pedagogy of the oppressed comes to say there must be interaction between the students and the teachers. And here what I'm going to talk about is the same kind of thing with the theater of the oppressed. So it requires more interaction between the players and the audience. So the spectator is not anymore passive. He is called spect-actor. It means he's also acting at the same time as the actor. So there is interaction going on. So why the theater was created? It's because in Palestine, as many of you might know, I think, there is what we call occupation, which is a term by the international community condemning the Israeli occupation since 1967. Meaning, since 1967, what we call Palestine, or what we call occupied Palestinian territories, it's occupied by another force, which happens to be Israel. So the first picture, it shows the difficulties of Palestinian people having when inside their land, which is West Bank and Gaza. So here the first picture, it's an old man cultivating his land, but behind there is settlers and military and so on. So the freedom is very much here restricted, and the access to the land, of course, it's also very much denied. And on the second picture, you see the wall. I'm going to talk a bit more about that. And the third picture that you see, it's children in refugee camps, as there is many in West Bank. If you have gone there, there is many refugee camps in Palestine. So the theater of the oppressed comes to say that people have to express themselves. And it's good for these kids because most of the kids, they experience trauma with all the consequences that, that a trauma can be. Because most of the kids have seen violence, house demolitions, their relatives being killed or shot, humiliated at the checkpoints. So the theater of the oppressed comes to give some expressions to these kids. It's a kind of healing for the kids to come and play. Yeah. So it's very popular in Palestine, but also worldwide. It's not only in Palestine. These kids or the theater itself goes and play in Europe and elsewhere. One of the methods of the theater of the oppressed, it's actually Gaza monologues, the same as Tahrir monologues. Tahrir monologue, I was talking that people tell their stories in a conflictual situation, in a public spaces and so on. Gaza monologues is the same. Kids here tell their stories in Gaza, what happened in Gaza in 2008, 2009, the bombing of Gaza. So these kids come and tell their stories, how it was difficult for them to get over that. And many of them, of course, they are still traumatized. And what you see on the picture, it's an expression. They send their stories to the ocean. It's a symbol to say that they must be heard. They must be heard by Europe and by non-Palestinians. Their suffering must be heard. Yeah? Traditional Palestinian embroidery, it's another form of art, but we put it under culture, arts and cultures. We met these women in Palestine, in Hebron, which is also in the West Bank. Hebron, it's divided into H1 and H2. H2 belonging to the settlers living inside, within the center of the city. There are about 500 and they are protected by more than 2,000 soldiers. And H1 belongs to the majority of Palestinians. Just to remind you, it's the West Bank. It's occupied Palestinian territories. And we met these women in the market of Hebron, which is now deserted for some reasons that I'm going to explain later. So these women, they are called women of Hebron, simply. They are the first women being in the market since a decade or a bit more. So it's a form of resistance. So what they do embroidery, which is a very traditional and historical heritage of Palestinians, both Palestinians, Christians and Muslims. They do a lot of things: carpets, pillows, purses, bags, and so on. The idea is to communicate with the internationals passing by, to say that they are also resisting in their own way, but also is to get an income, because most of Palestinian women, they don't have an income, and they don't have, many of them, they don't have their men or their husband supplying them, because many of Palestinians, they are jobless, especially in that area, not talking about Gaza, which is more than 85% of unemployed people, but here I'm talking about Hebron, which is the hotspot of the West Bank. The majority of Palestinians, they are jobless, or they are in prison for some reasons, or they are, I don't know, there's just no job. So these women come to say, we can also be independent, we can try to have our own economy, and that's what they do. Palestinian embroidery, which is a very old heritage of Palestinians, Christians and Muslims. So the patterns are very interesting. They are geometrical, but you don't see actually patterns related to religion, like Christians or Muslims, because Palestinians used to live together for decades. Palestinians, Christians, Muslims, and Jews, by the way, and there was no this will to affirm that they are Muslims or Christians or Jews. So the patterns belong to everybody. They are geometric, they are they can say a lot about where you're from, the region you are from, but not the religion you are from. Yeah? So we talked with them for a couple of hours, and they were telling us that this also should be known by your friends in Europe or elsewhere, because our suffering is the same as the suffering of men in occupied territories, but added to that, we live in a patriarchal society, so it's very, very difficult for them to be in that market, which is very actually dangerous, and not so many people are there. Even men are not there. So they are very proud to say we are the first independent women being in this market. So they have some troubles also with Palestinian men. To describe a bit around Hebron, I just want to talk about the market. The market is pretty much deserted. I was there 3 years ago. It was really, really bad. You could see almost nobody. Now it's a bit better. Why you couldn't see anybody? Because in the market, the settlers who occupy the places of Palestinians, they throw stones, they throw garbage, they throw water, they throw acid on Palestinians, and also you, if you happen to pass by as international. So the market, it's quite deserted right now. But the commune itself tries to pay the Palestinians to occupy to take back, to reappropriate their shops, and they give them like $200 a month to try to stay, whatever the consequences are. So it's a bit better compared to 3 years ago. So that's one of the reasons why this whole region market is deserted. And what you see in the middle, it's also around the market. More than, forgot to say, more than 1,000 shops, or even 1,800 shops were closed since the occupation. More than 1,800 shops. So it means it has killed the economy of Hebron and Palestine in general, because it was one of the biggest, if not the biggest market in the whole West Bank, Palestine. So what you see in the middle, one of the terrible things that are going on, what you see in the middle, it's called Shuhada Street, meaning apartheid street. It's called apartheid street by activists and by Palestinians. On the right, you see a woman, Palestinian, walking. It's a very narrow street. And on the left, it's a bigger street that is belonging to the 500 Israeli settlers in Palestine. So the Palestinians cannot walk into that street and vice versa. So this is a rule made by the Israeli administration. So you can imagine how these women or Palestinians can feel while walking in this kind of streets and so on. And it's very difficult for them to get into their houses or to get into their business and so on. So I won't go too long on that, because this area, there's so much going on. There's so much things divided. Even the mosque is divided. So it requires a whole lecture that we have given actually a few days ago. Now I'm going to talk about the wall. I know that I give a lot of information. I'm quite fast, but it's to have questions later. Now I'm going to talk about the wall and the forms of arts expression on the wall. But first, let's see what the wall is. What you see now, the big map, which is not big actually, but the big map, it's what we call the West Bank, occupied Palestinian territories. And what you see on the left, it's what we call Gaza. And what you see on the red, no, there's actually color, yellow and green, I don't know, around the wall. I don't know if you can see it. Yellow and green, yeah? Then there is a red line. The red line, it's actually the wall. But the wall should respect the green line as it was agreed since decades, since 1967, let's say. The wall should respect the green line. The wall started in 2002, around 2002, after the second Intifada. But what's happening is that the wall doesn't respect at all. Of course, it takes a lot of Palestinian territories, so it goes inside the Palestinian territories, taking the most fertile land and destroying houses, cemeteries, and so on. So this wall is also condemned by the international community, but at the end of the day, there's nothing happening the wall is more, it should be 810 kilometers. Now it has reached, I think, more than 500 kilometers. But the green wall itself, the line of respecting the borders, it's actually 350 kilometers. So you can guess that this takes most of the Palestinian land in the West Bank. Now I'm going to talk about the art expressions on the wall. What you see on the first picture, it's a picture on the wall on the Palestinian side, in the West Bank, in Bethlehem, where most of Christians live. Many Christians were living in Palestine, in Bethlehem especially, but since few decades, Palestinian Christians, they left the place because of the situation. And I was saying that there is less and less, and this tree, Christmas tree, inside the wall, it symbolizes the oppression of Palestinian Christians and Muslims. A few years ago, I was talking with a priest. I was having an interview with a priest in Bethlehem, and I dared saying, what about the Palestinian Christians minority living here? And he got very pissed at me because I said minority, and that's actually the feeling of Palestinian Christians. They don't consider themselves as a minority. So he shouted at me, said, don't never say minority. We are not minority here. We are Palestinians living with Palestinians, Christians and Muslims and non-religious people, but all of us, we are Palestinians. So don't talk about minority. And the same thing was said to me by another Palestinian person, saying that don't ever call them minority because they are part of Palestine. They are Palestinians beforehand. And we also had an interview recently when we were there this year with a Palestinian painter. He was in prison for some time. He went back in prison many times for unknown reasons, like it is most of the time. And we saw a picture of Jesus Christ. And we asked him, by the way, you're Muslim, why you painted Jesus Christ? And he said, because Jesus was a Palestinian. So he's part of the resistance. So just to say that it's not a religious issue here. We talk about a land taken by force by another force, and the people who happen to take that land are Israelis, and the people who are being oppressed are Palestinians, Christians, and Muslims, and non-Muslims. The picture that you see with the freedom, liberty, yeah? It's also one of the art expressions that you see. So it's quite interesting because you have the symbol of freedom having a baby in the hand, and this baby is called Handala. It's a boy. It's actually a boy painted by one of the most famous painters in Palestine who died now. It's called Naji Ali, and you'll always see this painting, the boy facing, giving his back. You'll never see his face. And the idea of it is to say, as long as we don't have our freedom as Palestinians, this boy will never show his face. And this picture is quite interesting because you still see this boy, or the back of his boy, and the freedom, the statue of freedom, taking this boy in his hands as a symbol also of oppression. Quickly about the picture in the middle, it symbolizes the third holiest place for Muslims worldwide, and this place is in the other side of the wall. It's called the Dome of the Rock. It's in a place called Al-Aqsa Mosque, but this specific place is called the Dome of the Rock. So in this place there is a rock that is a symbol of the sacrifice of Abraham of his son Isaac, and replaced by a sheep according to some traditions, Islamic or biblical or whatever. So it symbolizes that Palestinians living in the West Bank, they cannot even go to their land, to their holy places. So it's kind of dream for Palestinians. So that's why this picture is on the wall. It's a dream for Palestinians to go to that place, which is about like 20, 30 kilometers from there, but none of the Palestinians living in the West Bank can have access to that. Some can during the great day of Ramadan, they can go and pray, but there's always violence in there because most of them are denied access to that mosque. So that was it, and on the last picture you can see the wall, not very, very long and very snaky. It's the division of lands. And here you can see some art expressions on the wall. The pictures talk by themselves, Palestinians taken by Israeli soldiers, and we are talking inside the Palestinian territories. And there you can see Palestinians with stones. And stones, the fighting with stones, it's one of the symbols of the Intifada, first and second Intifada. Because while Israeli state administration is the fourth military power in the world, you have people with absolutely no army. They get guns from tunnels or from Egypt or whatever, but there is no army in the Palestinian territories. It's a joke. So I wanted to finish with that. I wanted to conclude on what we try to do is to give a human face to what we don't see. Is to give a missing picture of what we don't see most of the time in the mainstream media. Is to say, for example, regarding Palestine, that it's not the majority of the cases. It's not about terrorism. It's millions of people, both from religious backgrounds, social backgrounds, fighting for the same cause, and in a very, very peaceful way. The first time I was there, I was so shocked to see the peacefulness of Palestinians during the protests. I thought, come on, this is ridiculous. Is it how you're gonna get freedom? But yeah, I found myself having holding a candle and reading the Bible. I'm Muslim, by the way, but reading the Bible with Palestinian Christians in front of the wall. So it was very interesting for me to see that, because this is what's happening every day in Palestine, but we hear about the terrorists in Gaza and so on. So yeah, want to add something. So thank you for listening.